The hall in Brussels shimmered with white light and polished marble. Banners read, 2025 Global Democracy and Leadership Forum. The room was full. Heads of state, media giants, scholars, military brass, human rights activists. You could feel the weight of expectation in the air. At the center stage sat 5 world leaders. On the far left, U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris, dressed in navy, chin lifted high. And on the far right, Ibrahim Traoré, Burkina Faso's young president, military fatigues crisp, his eyes scanning the crowd like he already knew what was coming. The panel topic flashed across the screen behind them. Africa's role in global security. The moderator, a British journalist with too much confidence, opened, Vice President Harris, what's your take on Africa's emerging leadership? Kamala adjusted her mic, smiled tightly, and launched in. Africa is important, but let me be clear. If African governments want deeper partnership with the West, they must maintain democratic checks. There must be accountability, not strong men. The audience clapped politely. Traoré didn't flinch, but his fingers, resting on the armrest, curled slowly into fists. The air felt heavier. Something unforgettable was about to happen, and none of them were ready. A beat passed, then another. The moderator turned. President Traoré, your response? Cameras zoomed in. Live feeds ran across CNN, Al Jazeera, France 24, and TikTok Live. Traoré leaned forward, elbows on the table, gaze steady, not blinking, not smiling, just watching Kamala, like a soldier studying his battlefield. He spoke softly, but every word cut like glass. You don't scare me. A murmur rippled through the room. He didn't stop. Your threats come wrapped in diplomacy, but we know what follows. Sanctions, coups, propaganda. And when we resist, we become your undemocratic threats. Isn't that how you treat the rest of the world? Kamala's jaw stiffened. The audience froze. You could hear someone drop a pen. He continued. You don't get to lecture us about democracy while your corporations extract our gold, while our children die for the minerals inside your smartphones. A woman in the third row gasped. The moderator looked like he wanted to vanish. Kamala opened her mouth to respond, but the damage was done. That clip, just 37 seconds long, would be watched by 50 million people by the next sunrise. A storm had begun, and Traoré had lit the match. That night, hotel phones buzzed like hives. Embassies scrambled. Washington sent encrypted messages. French diplomats requested clarification. NATO officials whispered about image containment. But Traoré, he stayed in his hotel room, alone. No aides, no PR team. Just him, an old radio from his army days, and a photo of a boy, barely 8, taped beside his Bible. His son, killed in a drone strike meant for someone else in northern Burkina Faso. That night, as the video went viral, Traoré replayed it just once, not for vanity, for truth. Meanwhile, social media was erupting. This is what leadership looks like. He spoke what millions of Africans feel but are too scared to say. Kamala Harris just got humbled. How dare he? The world was splitting in two. But what they didn't know? That moment on stage was just the beginning. Because Ibrahim Traoré had come to Brussels with a folder of classified files. Real stories, real names, real crimes, done in the name of Western partnership. And when he opened that folder, the world would never be the same again. Early the next morning, while most leaders were still asleep or hiding from the press, Ibrahim Traoré stood on the balcony of his modest suite. In his hand, a black folder aged and worn with no country's seal. Inside were copies of documents smuggled out by whistleblowers, pages that detailed illegal arms shipments, rigged elections, and secret mining deals where African presidents were paid in silence while their people starved. There were photos, too. of a young girl in Mali, face burned in a NATO airstrike. A Congolese worker buried alive in a lithium mine owned by a European company. A Senegalese teacher jailed after exposing American surveillance tech in schools. Each file was tagged with a date and a number. But one page was marked differently, with only one word: Kaya. Traoré stared at it longer than the others. Kaya was where his own convoy was once ambushed, where he had held a dying child in his arms and promised, "One day, they'll hear your story." That day had come, and he was going to read those files, out loud, to the world, even if it meant he would never make it home alive. Back at the summit, chaos was brewing beneath the suits and smiles. Kamala Harris arrived late to the second day's panel. Her team whispered frantically, her phone buzzed non-stop. But something else was wrong. She wasn't as sharp. Her answers were shorter. Her voice cracked. Because hours earlier, alone in her suite, Kamala had rewatched the clip. At first she was angry, furious, but then came something unexpected: guilt. She zoomed in on Traoré's face as he said, "We know what follows." And in his eyes, she didn't see arrogance. She saw grief, exhaustion, truth. Kamala turned off the video. Then slowly, she walked to her bathroom mirror. She saw herself, the daughter of immigrants, a woman who had once fought for justice in Oakland, who had marched with her mother in the rain. But now, was she part of the system they once stood against? A single tear welled in her eye. She wiped it quickly, because soon she would return to that stage. And beside her would be the man who reminded the world that diplomacy without dignity is just decoration. And deep down, she knew he wasn't wrong. When Traoré took the stage again, there was no script, no teleprompter, just that worn folder in his hand and the weight of his nation in his chest. "Before I speak," he said, voice quiet but commanding, "let me tell you a story." The hall leaned in. Her name was Zara. She was 9. She loved mangoes and wanted to be a teacher. One morning in Kaya, while walking to school, she stepped on a landmine, made in Belgium, left behind by rebels trained with foreign aid. He paused. She bled in my arms. I had no bandage, only my scarf. Gasps echoed through the room. "You talk of democracy, but what do you call this, when a child dies for politics she doesn't understand?" He opened the folder, pulled out a photo, held it high. "This is her, Zara. She should be here, listening, learning, laughing." The room went still. Kamala lowered her eyes. A French official wiped his brow. "You say we must earn your partnership," Traoré said, staring at the cameras. "But maybe you must earn our forgiveness." And that's when the tears began. Not just from the Africans in the room, but from everyone. Behind the heavy glass of the translation booth, Aminata Diop, a 24-year-old Senegalese interpreter, froze. Her headphones trembled as Traoré's voice, soft but fierce, translated word by word into 5 languages. She had translated hundreds of speeches, none like this. As he spoke of Zara, her fingers shook. She remembered her own cousin in Guinea, shot during a protest, buried without a name, without justice. Suddenly, Aminata's voice cracked mid-translation. She muted her mic, covered her mouth. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she whispered, "Say her name again, Mr. President. Let the world remember the forgotten." In rooms across the globe, millions listened to that moment. Not just what Traoré said, but how he said it. With rage wrapped in restraint, with pain carried like armor. The hashtag began trending within minutes. Her name was Zara. That name became a weapon, a cry, a mirror. It wasn't just about Burkina Faso anymore. It was about all of us, the lives erased by systems too big to touch. And through a translator's broken voice, Zara finally reached the world. Inside the U.S. Embassy in Brussels, Kamala Harris sat alone in a secure room. The screen in front of her played Traoré's speech again. She didn't speak, until her aide said, "The president wants to respond." She sighed. No. Instead, she picked up her private line and dialed a number known to very few. "Get me Ibrahim Traoré." Across the city, Traoré stood beside a dusty memorial photo of fallen soldiers displayed in the African Unity tent. His aide approached, surprised. "The U.S. Vice President is calling." He answered with one word. "Yes?" There was a long silence. Then Kamala spoke, voice low. "I didn't know about Zara." "You didn't want to know." "Maybe. But I do now." Another pause. Her voice cracked. "I didn't call to fix anything. I just wanted to say I'm listening." Traoré didn't reply right away. His voice, when it came, was heavy with decades. "Listening is a start, but children don't come back. Trees don't regrow overnight. Africa needs more than ears. It needs courage from people who can change things." Kamala whispered, "I'll try." Traoré looked toward the sky. "Then let's see who you become." After the call, Traoré returned to his room. He opened the folder. And there it was, a file he had debated showing to the world. Label, Harris, 2021. Guinea operations. Not declassified. It wasn't criminal, not officially. But it told the story of U.S. intelligence tipping off a military faction in Guinea during a fuel crisis, a move that escalated unrest and led to the arrest of a young activist group. One of those arrested had died in prison. His name? Moussa Diallo. He was 19, a student journalist, the only child of a teacher, and the cousin of Aminata, the interpreter who cried in the booth. Traoré stared at the file. He could expose it right now. He could turn the world even more against Kamala. But instead, he slowly closed the folder. "Not yet," he whispered, "because this wasn't about vengeance. It was about truth with dignity." Traoré didn't want to destroy her. He wanted to wake her up. And somehow, maybe, just maybe, she was starting to stir. But the real storm was still ahead, because the next file in his folder had a European flag on it, and what it revealed would bring Brussels to its knees. That evening, as the conference hall prepared for its final day, Ibrahim Traoré sat alone in the green room. His eyes were fixed on the next file in the folder. This one was marked with a faded French flag. He opened it. Inside, reports on a secret agreement between French officials and an energy conglomerate operating in Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali. The documents showed how French troops secured uranium mines not for peace, but to protect foreign contracts, even if it meant turning a blind eye to local massacres. Traoré flipped to a photo. 12 unarmed villagers lying in a ditch. A small body, arms stretched wide, face down in the red dust. The caption, Djibo, May 2023, collateral. He blinked, swallowed. That girl could have been Zara's sister. Could have been anyone's sister. He looked at the final page, a French signature, still in power. The door opened behind him. A journalist from Senegal entered. "President, are you ready for your closing speech?" He looked up, eyes fierce but wet. "Yes, but I won't be giving a speech." "Then what will you do?" He held up the file. "I will tell the truth, loud enough that no one can sleep through it this time." The main hall was packed. Global news networks were live streaming. Tens of millions were watching. The final panel began. But all eyes were on Ibrahim Traoré. No script, no suit. He walked on stage in his military fatigues, the black folder tucked under one arm, a small photo of Zara in the other. He stood at the podium. "I was told to give a speech today. I won't. Instead, I will give you proof." He opened the folder and read names. dates, locations. Then held up the photos. Gasps, shouts, murmurs. One EU representative stood and stormed out. Another tried to interrupt, but the audience, even the Western audience, hushed them. Then he said, "This is not anti-West, this is anti-lies, anti-extraction, anti-silence. I am not asking for pity, I am asking for partnership that is equal, just, human." Then Traoré paused, looked to Kamala Harris in the front row. "You told us to choose democracy. We will, but our version, one built on dignity, not donations with conditions." He held Zara's photo high one last time. This girl never saw a parliament, but she taught us something greater. That truth must never kneel. And the room erupted. For a moment no one moved. Then one man, the Prime Minister of Barbados, stood and clapped. Then the President of Chile. Then the former activist from Kenya. Soon the entire hall was on their feet, except one, Kamala Harris. She didn't clap. She stood, but walked slowly onto the stage instead. Traoré turned, surprised. She reached for the mic, eyes glossy. "I'm not here to defend. I'm here to learn. The world we built isn't working for everyone. And if we keep pretending it is, more Zaras will die." She turned to him. "I don't agree with all your methods, but I see your heart, and I hear you now." The applause was softer this time, realer. A kind of uncomfortable truth hung in the air. Two worlds had just touched, not through politics, but through pain. Backstage, Aminata the translator watched, hands over her mouth. In the control room, a CNN producer whispered, "This is history." In a quiet refugee camp in Burkina Faso, Zara's mother saw her daughter's picture on screen and collapsed to her knees, weeping. Traoré looked out at the world. He didn't smile. He just whispered, "Now, we begin." The forum was over. The headlines had spread like wildfire. Africa's voice roars in Brussels. Zara's story changes everything. Traoré, hero or heretic. That night, Traoré's flight was scheduled for 8:10 p.m., but he never boarded. As his motorcade approached the airport, a call came through. His aide answered and then stiffened. "Mr. President, they've arrested Aminata." "What?" "She was intercepted near the media center. They say she leaked documents, false charges. French intelligence is involved." Traoré's jaw clenched. He paused, then ordered, "Turn around." "Sir, it's not safe." Neither is silence. He leaned back, eyes burning. He had started this to speak for Zara. But now, Aminata was the next Zara. He knew the risks, the surveillance, the shadows that follow truth-tellers. But he also knew one thing. If he left now, it would tell every African girl with a voice, "You're on your own." And Traoré would never leave a voice behind. He canceled the flight. He walked back into the lion's den. Because justice is not a speech. It's showing up when it costs you everything. Aminata sat in a cold metal chair, wrists handcuffed. No food, no phone. Just a dim bulb buzzing above her head. Then the door opened, and Ibrahim Traoré walked in. The guard behind him looked stunned. "Sir, you're not allowed." "I'm the president of Burkina Faso," he said quietly, stepping forward. "And she is under my protection." He knelt before Aminata. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, fighting back tears. "Why did you come?" "Because your voice changed everything." He handed her a folded piece of paper, his own handwriting. "If I don't make it out tomorrow, you must read this at the African Union." She looked at the letter, on the front, "To the next generation." In it, Traoré had written about Zara, about truth, about power without compassion being slavery with lipstick. Aminata broke down sobbing, and then the door opened again. Kamala Harris walked in, this time with UN observers and 2 legal reps behind her. "She's being released," Kamala said firmly. "As of now, she's under international protection." Aminata looked from Kamala to Traoré, and for the first time in days, she smiled. 3 days later, Ibrahim Traoré returned home. He didn't land in the capital. He flew straight to Kaya. No reporters, no parade, just him, a scarf around his neck, and one stop to make: the tiny gravesite on the edge of the village. There he knelt in the sand. Zara's grave had no headstone, just a handmade wooden sign and some dry flowers. He planted a small flag beside it, not a Burkina Faso flag, not an African Union flag, but a flag with Zara's drawing stitched into it, her dream of a son over 2 hands holding a book. He whispered, "They know your name now, little one." Behind him, Aminata stood quietly with a group of children, future translators, teachers, journalists. One by one, they stepped forward and planted their own tiny versions of Zara's flag into the earth, and the wind picked up. Across the world, Zara's name was now printed on protest signs, murals, documentaries, T-shirts, classrooms. She had never traveled, never stood on a stage, never given a speech. But through the voice of one man, she had changed the course of history. The sun was setting in Kaya. A golden hue washed over the village. That's when she arrived, Zara's mother. Thin, quiet. A scarf wrapped tightly over her head. She hadn't spoken to the press in 2 years. She had refused every interview, every donation. But she came, barefoot, walking slowly up the hill toward the flags. Ibrahim Traoré rose to meet her. They didn't speak. She looked at him, her eyes hollow, yet shining. Then, without a word, she pressed something into his hand. It was Zara's last drawing, a tiny page from a notebook, shaky, bright, full of hope. A son, a school, a girl with a raised hand. Then she hugged him. The whole hill seemed to hold its breath. She whispered just 5 words. "Thank you," for hearing her. And that was it. No speech, no headlines, just a mother and a man who had carried her daughter's name farther than any missile, louder than any politician. In that moment, Ibrahim Traoré was no longer just a president. He was a bridge between the silenced and the world that finally listened. Months passed, but the fire never faded. In Ghana, a school was renamed Zara Unity Academy. In Brazil, students marched holding photos of Zara, chanting, "Truth must not kneel." In France, 2 officials resigned after investigations tied to the files Traoré revealed. In Washington, a new resolution was passed, banning U.S. partnerships with regimes linked to child labor in African mines. And Kamala Harris. She returned to Africa, quietly, without press. She visited a school in Ouagadougou, sat with girls who had never seen a vice president before. She listened. She asked nothing. And as she left, one of the girls gave her a note. "Tell Zara we will keep learning." Meanwhile, Traoré continued to lead, firm, flawed, fearless. His critics were many, but his supporters were louder. He was not trying to be perfect. He was trying to be present, and every time he spoke, he ended the same way. "Say her name. Say it until the world stops forgetting us. Say it until no child dies invisible." And the world was still saying it. Zara. On the 1-year anniversary of Zara's death, a handwritten letter was read aloud at the United Nations. It was signed by Ibrahim Traoré, read by Aminata, and dedicated to the children who wait in silence. Zara never asked to be known. She only asked to learn, to play, to grow. But her silence taught us what speeches never could. She taught us that every child is a nation, and when a child dies forgotten, a piece of the world dies too. To the powerful, we don't want your pity. We want your honesty. To the young, you are not voiceless. The world is just deaf. Keep shouting. To the mothers, we carry your sorrow like a sacred song. And to Zara, the world says your name now, and it will never forget. Tears ran freely across the chamber, not out of sadness alone, but because somehow through all the grief, hope had been born. If Zara's story touched you, if you felt something real, don't let it end here. Click like to honor her memory. Click subscribe to carry the torch of truth, and comment just one word below. Zara. Let her name echo across the world.